So let's start with the first challenge that most people face, and that is knowledge, understanding, just asset protection in general, how things work. I get this a lot, and I put this example together because I think it's pretty appropriate. What is this right here? Oh, you saw that? You're good. Facial recognition without even understanding what that is. Most people don't get that. Yeah, but it's a horse. Now, this is an asset protection plan. See it a lot. People think that they've created an asset protection plan. They got this horse and they're riding it around. Look, I'm protected. I've created something. And everything works. That horse will continue to take you wherever you need to go until your plan is stress tested. One of my clients built herself a horse. I built the horse for her. And we created this horse. It was for real estate investing. She created multiple limited liability companies to hold all of her rental real estate. And then we created a corporation to manage it. And the corporation also engaged in flips, so it was buying and selling property. And so she had this very nice horse that was created for her. Now, the problem is that most times when people put together plans and they think they have the horse and everything's working just fine, they're riding it, but it just takes one lawsuit. And then when you find out is that horse that you think you created when you go into court is actually this end of the horse, and that you completely missed the mark altogether. Now, my client did that. She was actually dealing with this end of the horse that I created for her. And the reason why is not because of something that I did. It's because of something that her CPA had done to her. See, after the plan was created, she was a little frustrated because I explained to her that each of these limited liability companies require a bank account. I said to her, we'll just call her Joan. I said, Joan, you have to have one bank account set up for each LLC. And then your corporation needs to have a bank account. She said, well, that's 7 bank accounts. And that's just too complex for me. I cannot handle 7 bank accounts. She goes, I'm going to get a second opinion. So she went to her CPA and explained this issue. And he said, don't worry about it. Those attorneys, they just want to complicate your life. Here's what I can do. We'll run all the money through the corporation, and for federal tax purposes, I will account for the income with ledger entries back to the appropriate limited liability companies, and that way you can run 1 bank account rather than 7. How would you like that, Joan? She said, oh, that's the way I want to do it. That makes more sense. So that's how she operated her business. So for 3 years, she ran a very successful business when she thought she was riding this end of the horse. And this is what we find a lot with asset protection planning, is that you believe you have this, but when you're involved in a lawsuit, you don't want to find again that you have this end. And she found out she had this end because her corporation was sued. And a judgment was entered against it for $120,000. So she thought what she would do is bankrupt out the company and walk away. Say, all right, you've got a judgment against my corporation. Asset Protection 101 says if the corporation has no assets, you file bankruptcy on the corporation. You can't come after me personally because a corporation is a liability shield, so I'm not personally liable, so I'm walking away. Well, it didn't work out that way for Joan because the way she ran her business was her Achilles heel in this transaction. She thought she had a plan that was set up to protect her, but she herself dismantled the asset protection through her own actions because the creditor would not accept the bankruptcy of the corporation as the final answer. And in fact, what the creditor sought to do was take those 6 limited liability companies and take that $120,000 judgment and attach all of the assets. Now, of course, Joan thought she would argue that these are separate companies, and Asset Protection 101 states that if it's a separate LLC, the obligations of the corporation have no bearing on LLC number 6 or 5, 4, 3, 2, or 1. But the court reminded her that in order to have a business, you have to treat it like a business, Joan. And there are certain formalities you must go through. You blurred the distinction between what is personal, what is business, by the way in which you conducted your affairs. That by having all of the money centralized in the corporation and setting that up as the only bank account, you ignored the fact that you have 6 other businesses. And in order to run a business, don't you need a bank account? How does your business collect money? How does your business deal with the business expenses that come up on an annual basis without having a checking account inside of it? So the court thought that the most appropriate remedy in this situation was to treat all of the entities as one common enterprise. and therefore they gave the creditor the ability to attach all of her assets. And unfortunately, that was advice that came from a CPA who did not understand asset protection. He understands taxes, but he didn't understand the other side. And so stress testing an entity is very, very important. And that's something that Anderson brings to the table when we're looking at things. And many of the examples that I'll share with you, they're not made up. It's not something we sit back and go, hey, we got to come up with a new example for people to make them understand the importance of it. The examples we share with you are real-life examples of cases that either our clients have been in or they're cases that we've read. And the issues for us are relatively obvious on their face why the things are going to fail. And so that's what we're going to be talking about, real-world stuff that is happening right now. And as things change, so does asset protection. So I will tell you this, if you've been through an asset protection class in the past, and you'll say, well, that's not what I was taught 7 years ago. Well, this is an evolving market. Some of the strategies I recommended 7 years ago, I no longer recommend because they don't work. For whatever reason, maybe there's regulatory reasons now, the federal law that prevents us from utilizing that particular strategy. Or there's been some court cases now that call into question the effectiveness of that strategy. So keep that in mind.